Hello everyone, and welcome back to our second episode of the Class Breakdown series. I'm Bill, the admin and one of the instructors over on Altrole, and today we're going to continue our series to give you a general overview of all the classes in D&D 5th edition to help you learn about the classes you may want to try in your next D&D game. For today's episode, I'm very excited to go over the Barbarian class, a staple among tanks that can dish out a ton of damage and soak up even more. The Barbarian is a very beginner-friendly tank option in D&D, with simple abilities and mechanics that define their role very well. Now, the Barbarian typically comes from the tribal lands of D&D settings, living with their kin to hunt and keep in touch with their animal nature. Now, an important thing to note here, not all barbarous people are the Barbarian class, as living outside city walls is not going to grant every creature animalistic rage. True barbarians are select warriors or leaders of their tribe who hone their combat prowess to protect the tribe when threats arise. As part of this tribal living, though, barbarians can hone their savagery into a rage, a reservoir of fury that grants increased strength and durability for a limited amount of time. When it comes to their role in the party, the Barbarian is meant to be a tank, meaning that they can stand in front of the party and easily soak up damage. Now, the Barbarian's idea of tanking is to kill the enemy quickly with their immense physical damage, as well as soaking up hits from anything stupid enough to stay alive after their attacks. While their main emphasis is dealing a lot of melee damage, they also get one of the biggest health pools available to all the classes to make sure that they can stay in the fight as long as they need to. With the best durability of all the classes, the Barbarian is at home charging into the front line of the enemy with boundless fury, cleaving through enemies until there are none left. With all that in mind, the Barbarian's role in combat tends to focus on either locking down a big target as the party mops up little minions, or taking care of the dangerous minions to protect the party's backline casters or archers while someone else handles the big boss. To sum up the Barbarian, there are three main advantages and disadvantages they have when compared to the other classes. When it comes to the pros, the Barbarian is first very durable. As stated before, the Barbarian is the most durable of all the classes, whether they wear armor or not, due to having a d12 as their hit die, and through class abilities that increase their natural armor class and reduce the damage that they take in combat. They also have really great melee damage. Barbarians get buffs to their melee weapon attacks through their abilities, making them great for dealing chunky melee hits with large weapons like great axes, great swords, or mauls. Now lastly, Barbarians are of course very mobile. Despite their size and presence on the battlefield, Barbarians gain a lot of bonuses to their movement speed in battle, making them hard to lock down as they weave from target to target. Now with the pros, there are also cons, the first of which being that Barbarians really don't have any utility options. Barbarians tend to focus on killing the enemy quickly through mass damage rather than debuffing them. However, for beefy boss battles, this means that Barbarians are rather limited when it comes to options other than, I'm gonna go hit the thing. Now the second main con of the Barbarian is that they have few support options. While some subclass abilities can grant minor buffs to allies, overall the Barbarian does not work well as the party's main support character. Now lastly, the third main con that I want to bring up here is that the Barbarians have pretty bad ranged damage. Now, the Barbarians' focused role on melee damage buffs causes their ranged options to feel weak in comparison to other martial classes like the fighter or the rogue. Now, with the overview and role established, let's get into some of the cool abilities that the Barbarian unlocks in greater detail. Starting at level 1, the Barbarian gets Unarmored Defense and the Rage abilities. Unarmored Defense simply increases the Barbarian's armor class when they're not wearing any armor, with their base AC now being 10, plus their Dexterity modifier, plus their Constitution modifier. Barbarians can still wield a shield and gain the benefits of this. Rage, however, is the main ability of the Barbarian. As a bonus action when not wearing heavy armor, the Barbarian can rage to gain advantage on strength checks and saving throws, bonus damage to weapon attacks that use strength, and gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. The Barbarian has to attack an enemy or take damage in between turns to keep the rage going. Otherwise, it lasts for up to a minute unless it's manually ended as a bonus action, or if the Barbarian is knocked unconscious. Level 1 grants 2 uses of this per long rest, which increases with higher levels. At level 2, the Barbarian gains the Reckless Attack and Danger Sense abilities. With Reckless Attack, the Barbarian can choose on the first attack of their turn to make all their attacks that turn have advantage, but the trade-off is that any attack rolls against the Barbarian also have advantage until the start of the Barbarian's next turn. Danger Sense, on the other hand, gives the Barbarian advantage on dexterity saving throws that they can see. Level 3 unlocks the Primal Path, aka the Barbarian's subclass, which we're going to discuss in its own section after this one. However, if you want to, feel free to skip ahead and listen to that now. I certainly can't stop you. Level 4 unlocks the first of many ability score improvements, which adds +2 to 1 ability score or +1 to 2 ability scores, up to the soft cap of 20. Barbarians gain 5 ability score increases as they level up. If your DM is using the optional feats rule, you can of course forego an ability score improvement to take a feat instead. At level 5, the Barbarian unlocks the Extra Attack and Fast Movement abilities. Extra Attack allows the Barbarian to attack twice instead of once every time the attack action is taken, and Fast Movement increases the Barbarian's speed by 10 feet as long as they aren't wearing heavy armor. Level 7 unlocks the Feral Instinct ability, which grants the Barbarian advantage on initiative rolls as well as letting them avoid getting ambushed by enemies so long as they rage on their first turn during the surprise round. Level 9 unlocks the Brutal Criticals feature, which adds 1 additional weapon damage die when the Barbarian crits on a melee attack. At level 13, this increases to 2 additional dice, and at level 17, this increases to 3 additional dice. At level 11, the Barbarian unlocks Relentless Rage, which lets them potentially avoid death while raging. If the Barbarian drops to 0 hit points while they're raging and they don't die outright, they can make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw. If they succeed, they will instead drop to 1 hit point. Every consecutive saving throw using this ability before the next short or long rest increases the DC of this roll by 5. Level 15 unlocks Persistent Rage, which removes the 1-minute time limit and the requirement to hit an enemy or get hit by an enemy from the Barbarian's rage. After gaining this feature, Rage can only end if the Barbarian falls unconscious or if they choose to end it as a bonus action. Level 18 grants Indomitable Might, which lets the Barbarian substitute their strength score for a rolled strength check if the roll is lower than their flat strength score. Last, but certainly not least, level 20 will grant the Barbarian the Primal Champion ability, which increases their strength and constitution scores by 4 and increases the soft cap for those abilities to 24 instead of the normal 20. So, with these base class abilities, the Barbarian already appears to be a tough opponent that gains a lot of buffs to their defense, movement, and melee damage that all centers around their ability to rage. Now, let's take a look at the various primal paths available for the Barbarian, which will help tweak and reflavor where that Barbarian's rage comes from. There are 8 subclasses available to the Barbarian at level 3. Now, I'm going to go through them in alphabetical order, but if you want to skip ahead to a subclass you want to know more about, you can use the timestamps in the description to skip ahead to the one you want to learn. The Path of the Ancestral Guardians channels the tribal ancestors to defend the Barbarian's allies and reduce damage against them. When taking this subclass, the Barbarian gains Ancestral Protectors when raging. If the Barbarian hits an enemy while raging, the Ancestral Guardians will hinder that enemy from targeting anyone other than the Barbarian by giving them disadvantage when targeting other creatures. If they do try to target an ally, that ally will be granted resistance to the enemy's damage if the attack hits. Higher levels in this subclass grant a Spirit Shield to reduce damage to an ally within 30 feet, the ability to cast the Augury and Clairvoyance spells once per short or long rest, and a buff to Spirit Shield that reflects blocked damage to an ally back onto the attacker. Ultimately, the Ancestral Guardian focuses on protecting allies from enemies the Barbarian targets, using their ancestors to debuff enemy attacks so long as the Barbarian is being active in combat. Known as Axe Idiots in Dwarvish, Battleragers are dwarven followers of the gods of war, and specialize in using spiked armor to hurl their bodies into their enemies. Note that I said dwarven followers, because per the rules as written, this subclass is restricted to the dwarven race only, although DMs are free to ignore this restriction if it doesn't fit their setting or, if they just don't want to do it. When taking this subclass, the Barbarian gains Spiked Armor as a medium armor option. While wearing Spiked Armor, grapples deal additional piercing damage, and when raging, the Barbarian can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with the armor spikes against a target within 5 feet of them. Higher levels of this subclass buff Reckless Attack to also grant temporary hit points, grant the dash action as a bonus action while raging, and lets the Barbarian deal piercing damage to enemies who hit them while raging. Now, with this in mind, the Battlerager is still a laughably bad subclass. The entire subclass revolves around wearing a special medium armor piece that's worse than unarmored defense at later levels. The armor itself does as much damage as a dagger would, it doesn't scale at later levels, and relies entirely on monsters continuing to target you without giving you any abilities to draw aggression from them. Generally, this is considered the worst subclass available for barbarians, and in good faith, I cannot recommend it to you, but you are more than welcome to try it if you would like to. Path of the Beast channels the primal spirit or shapeshifter ancestry of the barbarian, augmenting their rage to cause them to physically transform into beasts for a limited time. When taking this subclass, the Barbarian gains the Form of the Beast, which lets them manifest one of 3 natural weapons every time they rage: a bite, a claw, or a tail. At higher levels, the Path of the Beast grants natural weapons magic damage, a passive buff that can change every short or long rest, extra psychic damage to natural weapon attacks that forces enemies hit to attack another nearby creature, and a buff to rage that grants a number of creatures near the Barbarian temporary hit points and a damage bonus. This freedom, coupled with the good defensive buffs the subclass grants to the party as a whole, means the Path of the Beast is a good all-around choice to try out for your Barbarian. The Path of the Berserker focuses on the thrill of chaos that comes from battle, and Berserkers charge headlong into the fray with no regard for their own well-being. When taking the Berserker subclass, Barbarian Rage has an added frenzy that grants a bonus action attack on any turn the Barbarian is raging on after their initial one. When this frenzied rage ends, they suffer 1 level of exhaustion. Further levels in this subclass grant immunity to being charmed or frightened while raging, being able to frighten someone as an action, and a reaction to attack any creature that damages the Barbarian. While the roleplay aspect of the Berserker is very cool, it's definitely weaker than the other options you have available. The main draw it gives you comes with unavoidable exhaustion, and there's no added damage to your strikes, just a couple more you can make as a bonus action. Ultimately, while Battlerager is still the worst subclass in my opinion, Berserker is right behind it as the second worst. Storm Heralds tap into the primal magic their rage unlocks, channeling it around them to create immense magical effects. When taking this subclass, the Barbarian gains a 10-foot aura based on one of 3 environments that have different effects when raging. These effects can be dealing fire damage in an area of effect, striking a target with lightning damage, or granting temporary hit points to allies. The potency of each aura increases at higher levels, and while raging, these can be reactivated as a bonus action. At higher levels, the Storm Herald gets passive resistance to a type of damage based on the chosen environment, an added buff based on that environment, the ability to add that resistance to their allies who are within range, and an even greater aura effect at level 14. Unlike Path of the Beast, that can change specialization every rest, the Storm Herald can only change environments on a level up, trading some flexibility for more specialization. Each aura offers a wide range of impressive and useful buffs to both the Barbarian and their allies, making the Storm Herald a flexible tank that can act as a secondary support that still emphasizes heavy damage. Totem warriors tap into their supernatural might to fuel their rage with magical energy drawn from the spirit animals of their tribe. Totem animals themselves tend to be considered kin by the rest of the tribe and will reflect on the totem warrior both spiritually and physically. When taking this subclass, the Barbarian chooses a totem animal, which grants a buff specific to the animal chosen, as well as the ability to cast Beast Sense and speak with animals as rituals. The different totem spirit choices each have a specific playstyle or buff associated with them. The bear doubles down on tanking hits and physical strength. The eagle focuses on moving through enemies without provoking opportunity attacks. The elk focuses on raw movement speed and moving unhindered in battle. The tiger focuses on jumping and pouncing on enemies. And the wolf emphasizes controlling enemies to make them easier for your allies to hit. Further leveling in this subclass grants even greater totem options, and leveling up allows free mixing and matching of different animal buffs. The Barbarian also gains access to the Commune with Nature spell as a ritual, where a chosen totem animal conveys whatever information is being sought. Now, the Totem Warrior is definitely the subclass I've seen played the most on Barbarian characters, and for good reason. Like the Storm Herald, it offers a lot of flexibility in the choices you can make as you level this subclass, granting different buffs that you can mix and match depending on what playstyle and role you want in the party. While the Totem of the Bear is a common and powerful tank option, I would encourage you all to look at and try out some of the other animals to see the different playstyles they can facilitate. Wild magic barbarians are susceptible to the immense magical power of certain planes of existence, such as the Feywild and Upper Planes, and as such their rage is modified by the magic of these places. Taking this subclass grants the Wild Surge ability, where every rage has the Barbarian roll a d8 on the subclass's wild magic table to get a random effect. They also get Magical Awareness, an action that allows the Barbarian to sense any spell or magical item that isn't behind total cover. Further levels in this subclass let the Wild Magic Barbarian buff allied attack rolls, restore the spell slots of an ally, use their reaction upon taking damage to roll on the Wild Magic table, and eventually roll twice on the Wild Magic table and choose which effect should occur. Now ultimately, Wild Magic Barbarians rely on the randomness of dice rolls to affect the battlefield. While powerful, the irregular nature of what effect you're going to get makes it difficult to showcase their full capabilities in battle. If you want a more random playstyle that's affected by things outside of your control, the Wild Magic Barbarian might be a good choice to try out. Last but certainly not least, Zealots are barbarians who channel their rage into worship for a divine power, though typically to gods of destruction, chaos, and violence. Taking this subclass grants the Barbarian Divine Fury, where the first hit on an enemy with a weapon attack deals a choice of bonus radiant or necrotic damage. On top of that, whenever the Barbarian has life restored to them through spellcasting, the caster no longer needs material components to do so. Later levels in this subclass grant rerolls on failed saving throws while raging, a bonus action to give creatures within range advantage on attack rolls and saving throws for a turn, and the ability to stay conscious when reduced to 0 hit points while raging and continuing to take turns as normal, until the rage ends. With that incredible ability in mind, the Zealot Barbarian is an immensely powerful subclass, focusing on single target damage and simply being too angry to die. Now, if you like the idea of having your character kill in the service of a god, but you don't really want to play a cleric or a paladin character, the Zealot Barbarian tends to fill that role really nicely, while still allowing for chunky melee hits and just being very, very hard to kill on the battlefield. If you're interested in that, try it out, you might like it. With all the class and subclass abilities laid out, I want to leave you all with some tips on how to go about building a barbarian if you'd like to try one for yourself. Since barbarians are focused on being melee tanks, their role is very singular, which makes it very easy to pick ability scores and equipment. For the purposes of this example, let's just go through a standard level 1 Great Weapon melee barbarian. When it comes to ability scores, the barbarian focuses on strength as being their highest ability score to maximize melee damage. This is followed up by constitution as the second highest, to make sure you have the hit points to soak up the attacks that land on you. I would also recommend putting your third highest score in dexterity to increase your unarmored defense, but the rest can be spread out however you like to buff up skill modifiers. To determine your starting health, just take 12 plus your constitution modifier to determine how much you have starting at level 1. The equipment choices for the barbarian are equally simple, and unless you don't like the options given, you can just go with the standard choices of a great axe, which is a great two-handed weapon that deals amazing strength damage, 2 hand axes to grant you some throwing weapons for out-of-reach enemies, and the Explorer's Pack and 4 javelins, granting even more thrown weapons and some adventuring equipment. Next, let's delve into the abilities granted at level 1, which for the Barbarian are the Rage and Unarmored Defense abilities. For Rage, be sure to mark down how many rages you have per rest, as well as the added melee damage that it gives you, both of which are based on your level and shown in the Barbarian class table. When using Unarmored Defense, also make sure to edit the armor class on your character sheet to take into account 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your constitution modifier. And with that, we have a level 1 barbarian ready to rage. And with that, we've now gone through everything that you need to know about the barbarian class in D&D. Often considered a simple tank that just focuses on smashing enemies and brushing off hits with ease, the barbarian does do that. It's a very good unkillable raging brute, but it does have a lot of options for specialization that really expand both the class and its mechanics and the character in roleplay. Now, I for one love the Barbarian class. It's one of my go-to classes if I want a really good tank character that just focuses on just letting loose and releasing some unbridled rage. But what do you all think? Is the Barbarian something you'd like to try out in your next game? Let me know in the comments below, or join us over on the Altrole Discord, which is linked in the description, to discuss it with our community. While you're there, feel free to say hi and check out our live courses that we run every week for free that cover any and everything you could possibly need to know to play D&D. If you want to help support the server and this channel, you can check out our Ko-fi page in the description as well. Lastly, if you found this breakdown helpful, feel free to share it with a friend to help them learn more about D&D and help us reach more new players to get them into D&D. But that is everything I had for you today. Our next breakdown is going to be on the Monk class, so if you want to find out more about everyone's favorite Buddhist badass class, we plan on releasing that video very soon. We're also hosting a poll on what class you all would like broken down after the Monk, so if you really want to see a specific class explained in this style, head on over to the Discord and cast your vote while the polling is still up. But with that, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of you supporting us here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see all of you next time.